The movie opens at a lake house where Teresa, a young woman, is frightened by her friend Caleb's drone while she relaxes by the water. Teresa visits Jessica, her other friend and Caleb's girlfriend, who hasn't been feeling well since they arrived. Jessica starts to read aloud a sentence from the page that Teresa is reading. Jessica begins reading Wuthering Heights as Teresa keeps an eye on her and sits by her side. Before she collapses onto the bed, Jessica grabs Teresa's hair and scalps her while Teresa checks on her and attempts to aid. Teresa stumbles over to Caleb, who notices Jessica possessed. She grabs the drone and uses it to cut her own face. She raises herself menacingly above the water and tosses his severed head towards Teresa. A pregnancy test was being taken in the restroom one day earlier by a lady named Beth who was at a concert venue with the band she performs with. When she sees the result, she displays a frightened expression on her face. In another location, Beth's sister Ellie lives with her 3 children, activist Bridget, aspiring DJ Danny, and little Cassie, who is fascinated by the macabre. Jake, a neighbor who has a crush on Bridget, knocks on her house with his younger brother Scott, but she declines their invitation to watch the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. The sisters are separated from one another and had a difficult connection with their mother when Beth comes to the apartment to speak to Ellie. Even though Ellie hasn't spoken to Auntie Beth in a while, despite the fact that the kids enjoy her, she was unaware that her husband abandoned the family months ago. While she speaks to Beth, Ellie orders pizza for the kids. Ellie is informed that she made a mistake again and requires her assistance to correct it. When the kids return from getting pizza, there is an earthquake that causes the parking garage to collapse. Danny enters the hole and discovers a secret space with vinyl records and the Natrum Demontus/Necronomicon, also known as the Book of the Dead. Bridget is not pleased with what he discovers when he returns the book to the apartment and reveals it to her. When Danny tries to open a book, he cuts his hand, and the book opens as a result of the blood on it. Danny hears the voice of a priest discussing the Necronomicon's nature while listening to one of the vinyls after Bridget leaves the room. Danny also sees horrifying illustrations of the Necronomicon's contents. Ellie is returning to the elevator to grab some things when she is abruptly ambushed by an invisible force that brutally ties her to the elevator wires. Ellie goes back to the apartment, now possessed by the demons known as Deadites. She begins throwing eggs onto a frying pan, some of which are filled with blood. Ellie starts speaking in a calm voice about cutting her kids open and climbing into them before she starts to crawl after them. She then vomits all over the floor before the real Ellie manages to speak and begs Beth to not let the demons take her children. Ellie then collapses, apparently dead. Ellie's neighbors Gabriel and Mr. Fonda assist Beth in putting Ellie to bed. Up until Ellie returns, alive, Beth expresses sorrow for her relationship with her sister. She is heating up, so Beth and Danny attempt to place her in a cool water bathtub. Ellie gets to her feet again and informs Danny, "Mommy's with the maggots now," before scaling the roof and shrieking inaudibly. Ellie then makes an attempt to harm her children, slashing Bridget's cheek with a tattoo pen before Danny knocks Ellie off. Gabriel and Mr. Fonda try to exit the building through a fire escape once the building's electricity goes out in order to obtain assistance. Deadite Ellie chases the neighbors after Beth and the kids shut her out of the apartment. Before murdering Jake and Scott with extreme brutality, she bites out Gabriel's eye. Mr. Fonda aims his weapon towards Ellie, but she manages to disarm and mutilate him. Up until Ellie rips out Gabriel's neck, he is still breathing. She then makes an attempt to re-enter the apartment. Bridget starts gushing ink from every pore in her face as her wound darkens and turns black. She also vomits up insects, turning into a deadite. While this is going on, Ellie's deadite self attempts to talk Cassie into unlocking the door for her by pretending to be her mother. Ellie is managed to remain outdoors by Beth and Danny. Beth discovers Bridget chewing on a wine glass while she is squatting on the kitchen counter. She then pursues Beth, using a cheese grater to sever one of her legs. Bridget pursues her siblings after that until she attacks Cassie, who is clutching one of her homemade doll's pointy end, and impales Bridget through the mouth, presumably killing her. Then, for her safety, Danny ties her up and places her in bed. In addition to showing Beth the vinyls, Danny is honest with Beth regarding the Book of the Dead. In the meanwhile, Bridget begins to stand up, and Ellie enters the apartment again by crawling through the vents, implicitly murdering a cat that was in there. Beth is listening to the vinyl records when she overhears the priest discussing how he had to execute his companions who became possessed, eventually having to dismember them totally. Bridget then strikes Danny and stabs him while Ellie pursues Beth. The Deadite almost enjoys murdering them both since he knows Beth is expecting a baby. Bridget is temporarily lit on fire by Danny, but she quickly extinguishes the flames and returns. Then, Beth decides to make an effort to escape the situation without harm to Cassie and herself. When Beth and Cassie attempt to climb down the fire escape, the neighbors whom Ellie killed have now also turned into Deadites. Now that Deadite Danny has joined them, Ellie and Bridget pursue them. Before Ellie and Cassie go down, Beth shoots off her arm and leg. Danny and Bridget begin digging Ellie's body to create a type of spider Deadite. When Beth and Cassie reach the parking garage, they are just about to make it out when Beth's car gets stuck in a pothole. As the Deadite spider approaches, they hide. Before the Deadite sees Cassie, they almost leave. They almost cut off her head with a chainsaw before Beth shoots them with the rifle. The Deadites switch on a wood chipper and attempt to drag Beth into it, but Cassie is able to stop it. As Cassie puts the wood chipper back on, Beth takes the chainsaw and forces Ellie, Bridget, and Danny into it. While she kills her sister, niece, and nephew out of remorse, Beth tosses Deadite Ellie's skull into the wood chipper. Beth consoles Cassie as she sobs for the death of her family and leads her outside. The next day, it is made known that Jessica lived on the level below Ellie and the children. The grisly incident from the previous night interrupts her plans to join Caleb and Teresa. An unseen entity then pursues her, causing Jessica to scream.